All right, welcome into the Aggie Up podcast. I'm Isaac Draxler, and as we always say, podcasting or making a podcast is harder than it looks. And one example tonight, trying to get everybody's schedule together and everything, it didn't quite work out, so I'm flying solo. Seth is sick. Um, didn't really have any desire to get somebody from Boise on, um, so it didn't happen. So anyway, we have a few things, or I have a few things that I wanted to talk about tonight, and hopefully we'll have some interaction, some questions on Twitter and so forth. Um, and a few have come through, which is great. Keep those coming through. Aggie Up on Twitter um, is the best way, or U State Aggies on Twitter as well. Um, you can always listen. Obviously, you're listening to this right now, but you can always listen to the Ag Up podcast on any podcasting app, whether it's iTunes, Spreaker, um, iHeartRadio are the top ones, probably most popular ones. But we even have a YouTube channel that you can listen to it on. Really any of the other apps you can use as well. So, with that, let me just start out by saying, Boise State is the toughest competition or toughest opponent left on the Aggies' schedule, and I guess some may say that means if they lose to Boise State, no big deal. They've got three teams that they can beat left on the schedule. Um, but I would argue that Boise State's a really important game, and yeah, with a new quarterback and some changes, and hopefully the Aggies can win. Um, three out of the last four games. I get that, but really, if as far as the standings and everything, I think the goal at this point is to jump Wyoming and get into one of those five bowl games that are guaranteed for the Mountain West. Um, there may not be a sixth spot in the bowl season, depending on what happens with teams like Texas, UCLA, Utah, Colorado. Some of those Big 12 and Pac-12 teams. If they get to six wins, obviously Texas is going to get into some of those bowl games. Texas Tech, UCLA, Utah, those teams I just mentioned, those teams are going to get into the bowl game instead of the Aggies. There's no doubt about that. So Aggies, obviously, six wins is bowl eligible, but there is a chance that a six-win team in the Mountain West does not get into a bowl game, and so that's why this game on Saturday is so important. Is if the Aggies beat Boise State, they still have a chance to jump Wyoming and get into that fifth spot and get into a bowl game. Um, so with that, let's get into. Well, actually, let's start with a question. One of the questions is a good place to start with this kind of matchup, I guess, and it's from Greg Stevens. Gregor's 1868 on Twitter says or asks. Is Boise State's defense really that good, or Mountain West offense is just kind of bad? Um, so Boise State's offense and Boise State's defense, statistically, has not really been that amazing, in my opinion. Um, the the stats aren't that amazing. Like I say, as far as scoring points, putting up yards and that kind of thing. But really, both offensively and defensively, they're getting enough production. They're getting enough um, points to win games, obviously. And you can say, they lost to a couple games one to Washington State, one to Virginia. I thought both of those were in Boise, but I guess one was at Washington State one was at home against Virginia. So they've lost against two P5 teams, and and really whether their defense is as good as maybe some think or not. Really, San Diego State is obviously a really good running team, a good team in general, and they beat pretty soundly. Wyoming, obviously, we saw they're a pretty good team. They've got a good quarterback, and they were able to stop Wyoming and stop a really good quarterback in Josh Allen. Josh Allen did not look good in that game. He had a bad game, and Boise State got some turnovers. They won the turnover battle and obviously won the game 24-14 against San Diego State. They won 31-14, BYU 24-7, and so forth and so on. So they've been good. New Mexico is another example. They beat New Mexico 28-14, and they took away New Mexico's running game. They took away strength, and San Diego State only rushed for 83 yards against Boise. So I mean, if the Aggies can have, I guess, for the Aggies to have a chance, um, really they can't get um, dependent on the passing game or the running game. Obviously, the QB running game or any one facet, they've got to mix it up. They've got to do well in all facets of the offense to have success. So I think that'll be a key, along with turnovers. Boise State's going to throw so many different things at Jordan Love that I think that'll be a big key. That'll be a big thing to watch as far as if he has mistakes and makes mistakes against that defense. That's gonna definitely throw some things at him and make it more difficult than UNLV did. UNLV's offense, or excuse me, UNLV's defense was as bland and as lifeless. I don't know. I haven't seen a defense like that for a long time. I almost don't even have words to explain it. So it's really tough to explain. I don't understand how that team can be so bad, to be honest. So um, I guess that defense, really they almost looked like one of those teams that was going up against a an FCS team, first game of the season, a spring game or something that you're being really vanilla on defense. That's how UNLV was. They were super vanilla on defense and not much change or unpredictability or anything like that. So um, Boise State's going to be definitely the opposite, both offensively and defensively. They're known for trick plays. They're known for changing things up and trying to confuse the offense and the quarterback. This year, the offense with Boise State is super unpredictable because they've got Cozart, who's more of a mobile quarterback, and they've got Rippon, who's a quarterback. They're going to switch back and forth quarterbacks. They're going to ride the hot hand. They're going to put Cozart in at wide receiver. So you just never know what they're going to do. But really, the bottom line is they're going to do whatever it takes to win the game. They're gonna do the best they can with what they've got. So um, in the two games that the Boise State's lost, they allowed 433 passing yards, obviously against Washington State, and 273 yards against Virginia. Virginia really, ran the ball pretty well, 167 yards. New Mexico ran for 198 yards um, against Boise State. And other than that, they've been right around 100 or under as far as allowing rushing yards. So running the ball is not easy against this Boise State offense, but if you can mix things up, you can you can do some things against them, as Virginia showed, to be able to kind of do both. Looking through some of the other stats, the Boise State offense only had 30 rushing yards against Virginia. They did have 353 yards passing, um, and was one of their biggest games, offensively. But they really just didn't score enough points, or I guess they didn't stop Virginia enough because Virginia scored 42 points, obviously. So I mean, it's not a typical super high scoring game. I mean, in Mountain West play, they've won with 28 points, 24 points, 31 points, and 24 points. So that'll be interesting to see. I'm expecting this game, at least the winning team for sure will be over 30, 35 points in my opinion. Um, but one of the defense is gonna have to show up and get some turnovers, get some things going. So yeah. Let's see. It looks like going through here. It looks like some more questions coming in. Let me see if we have any other Boise. Is Brian Harsin on the hot seat? I mean, I think this year, maybe will be an important year for Harsin, kind of moving forward. Whether he's on the hot seat or not, he's not on the hot seat yet, in my opinion. Obviously, the Aggies could help with that by beating Boise on Saturday, but Boise State fans in general, and I think the university and athletic director, I'm sure they expect to win Mountain West championships. They expect to go to the Mountain West championship game, and when they're not, as they have not in the last couple of years, that's disappointing, I'm sure. But this year they're on track to make that happen. They obviously have to play, Air Force and Colorado State and a few teams, and then a Mountain West championship game, even if they get to that point against like a Fresno State. So that'll be they actually play Fresno State to end the year as well. So that'll be one to we'll see what happens. Um, Let me see if there's any. There's a few recruiting questions which I'll get to. Will the Aggies be able to control the clock with the run game? That was brought in by Ground Game at Ground Game underscore, um, which I believe Emmett White is one of the. If he doesn't run that, he's involved with the Ground Game. I know. So Emmett White, obviously a former running back at Utah State, wants to know if Utah State's going to be able to run the ball. Um, I think the Aggies need to run the ball. I think they will have a hard time running the ball unless they open up the defense and open up the passing game and hit on some short passes. Get Dax Raymond involved. I think they probably got to kind of loosen up that rush defense a little bit more than the other way around and try to just pound the ball and establish the run game, if that makes sense, because there's definitely two different styles, two different philosophies as far as that goes, and I don't think you can just, well, we're going to establish the run game, we're going to hand the ball off 3 times the first possession and 3 straight times and see what happens. That's probably not gonna work too well. You probably got to mix things up and open things up with the pass game. So, but as I mentioned before, the Jordan Love's gotta make good choices. Gotta make good decisions, and I think he's capable of making good decisions, more than Kent Myers. And so making good decisions, especially under pressure, with pressure coming, that kind of thing. Um, I think that'll be one of the keys for the Aggie offense. Um, so a few more stats, as I mentioned, or yeah, I think I already mentioned it. The turnover margin. Both Utah State and actually, let me double check. The Aggies lost the turnover battle in their losses for the most part. They were even against Colorado State, but that game was kind of weird. Um, and same thing with Boise State. So, um, when these teams win the turnover battle, they usually win the game. So I think Utah State will come out, and I think they'll probably be talking this week, just like against BYU, that they've got to win the turnover battle. If they win the turnover battle, they can beat Boise State. And like I mentioned, I mean Boise State is not the unbeatable team that some people thought they were. Or they were in a few years ago or whatever. They're a beatable team. Um, you just have to be really solid. You got to win the. You got to get some of those battles and turnovers and so forth. So um, let's see if we have any more questions. But oh, the other thing I was going to mention, or maybe I'll just talk about this while I'm looking up one more thing. The um, the positions kind of grading out the positions so far this year and so forth. And I put out the question, what positions do the Aggies need next year, and do they need to upgrade? A position that I would point to, and I'd kind of compare it to this year's, I guess last year's linebackers. I would say the defensive line. I mean, in my opinion, I think the defensive line is something that they've got to go out and try to upgrade some positions, upgrade some guys. It may not numbers wise be a huge need this year or this signing class, but I really think the Aggies need some guys to come in, especially more DN type guys, guys that can run around and stop these rushing attacks like the Air Force and New Mexico and some of these teams that run the ball so much. Um, the other, I guess, position that a lot of people have talked about on Twitter a lot is running back. With Trey Miller, there's no guarantee that that'll happen. Um, too much. They may obviously keep their eye out for running back, especially high school running back. Um, but with Morian Walker coming back from injury, um, Trey Miller was a freshman this year. El Toro Allen's coming back. Justin Hervey's coming back. Really, you just lose Lawan Hunt. So they'll probably take, I would guess, a freshman running back. So we'll see what happens with that. Um, I was just looking for one more stat that I was going to pull up or going to talk about here, if I can find it. Um, so, um, so as far as recruiting, I think defensive end, like I said, even with Naliai coming in as a transfer from TCU, expected to come in at least, as long as everything works out with his legal problems and transfer and everything. He'll be obviously a huge addition, but and not a lot of graduation. I mean, going through the roster, you've got big losses in guys like Dallin Levitt, Jalen Davis, Ian Tongiai. Um, you've got Lawan Hunt as a senior. You've got Kent Myers, obviously, as a senior. Tony Lindsay may get a year back since he got injured very beginning of the season. You've got a couple wide receivers graduating with Jaron Colston Green, Alex Byers, and Braylon Roberts. So there's definitely some room there at wide receiver. The So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Tony Lindsay. I would say you should always try to get that year back because Tony Lindsay and basically the running back position, um, you can keep a guy instead of adding one of your 25 new scholarships to that position. So that may make it easier to not take a running back. They may still take a running back, but it doesn't make it as important to take a running back this class, and especially makes it a little bit easier to take a high school kid. Um, I guess Odegaard is a senior as well, a long snapper. I didn't realize he was a senior, but few positions that the Aggies will have to replace. There's a lot of juniors on this team, and so again, there's a a lot of your linebackers are juniors. A lot of your offensive linemen are juniors. A lot of your I already said linebackers. A lot of your safeties are juniors, and so some of those are positions that you could probably bring in a guy or two just to kind of backfill those positions. But when you're bringing in athletes, my recruiting philosophy is, what, some of these athletes are going to be linebackers, some are going to be safeties, some are going to be wide receivers, some are going to be defensive backs, some are even going to be defensive ends. So you recruit good athletes, and usually it all works out as far as what position, kind of where they end up playing. So um, there's definitely there's some openings there. The other question, let me see if there's another question. Defensive backs for next year, yes, there'll definitely be probably a couple of JC guys that are defensive backs. Go to ustateaggies.com. Actually, I think the best breakdown is on the premium section because Brian and I really break down where every scholarship is going, all 85 scholarships and all 25 new scholarships. But just to touch on it a little bit, the Aggies have some push forwards and some some return missionaries, a couple guys that have committed. Andrew Peasley, who's a quarterback from Oregon, and Tim Patrick from California. The return missionaries will be Daniel Longi for sure, Simeon Matagi, and Wade Meacham. Wade Meacham is a offensive lineman, big kid, 6'6". Probably lost a lot of weight on his mission, so hopefully he can get back up to weight as soon as possible. But basically, I mean, probably Brian lists, running back, wide receiver, tight end, a couple offensive linemen, at least a high school linebacker, high school couple cornerbacks, JC cornerback, high school safety. Um, I really think the Aggies will add a defensive end. Um, as I just mentioned, definitely is a need more than anything, more than a numbers thing. Um, the The other thing I wanted to touch on, and it's kind of been a hot topic, is getting to a bowl game this year. The uh, the latest bowl projections that I've seen on a lot of sites project the Aggies to miss a bowl, and project the Mountain West more importantly with only 5 teams in bowl games. So, um, in my opinion, that makes it so that the Aggies need um, they need they need to get to 7 wins, in my opinion. So if the Aggies don't get to 7 wins, there's a good chance the Aggies don't make it to a bowl game at all. Um, and there's always the possibility, and I think I already touched on it briefly, that some of those teams definitely have the possibility of not getting to 6. Obviously, teams like UCLA may or may not get to 6 wins. But if you think about it, last year there was one more bowl game. There was only 12 teams from the Big 12 and Pac-12 that were bowl eligible. So, for example, the let's take the Frisco Bowl for example, which is supposed to be an AAC team versus kind of a Conference USA, MAC, Mountain West, BYU type team. Well, one of those teams, one of those teams from the Pac-12 or the Big 12 could end up getting that instead of the Mountain West, and definitely could end up being a Conference USA or a MAC team or obviously AAC is guaranteed to get one of those spots. So Conference USA may or may not have enough bowl teams, but I mean like Marshall, um, the MAC, Akron from the MAC, Memphis from the AC, I think already has enough wins. Houston looks like they're going to be bowl eligible. Western Michigan, Florida International, um, Arkansas State from the Sun Belt, Ohio from the MAC. So, I guess the Aggies could hope and pray, obviously, if they get to 6 wins, that it all works out. But in my opinion, it's going to be a really long shot for the Aggies to get to a bowl game with only 6 wins, and even more importantly, with a bowl win or with 6 wins and no win against Boise State. That 6 wins isn't a great resume to convince Bulls to take Utah State over like Wyoming, take Utah State over another team for kind of at-large spot. Like I said, the Frisco Bowl, for example, is a at-large team, but a team like Western Kentucky's the team that's in that spot right now. So anything can happen. I get that. There's always the chance that the Aggies win 6 and get to a bowl, but it's pretty unlikely. And I'm just gonna start that right now, so it's not a surprise to everybody when they say, "What? How can a 6-win team not make a bowl game? And this isn't fair, or whatever." I think this year will be a different year than last year, for example, in years past. And I don't even want to talk about if the Aggies are 5-7 if they make a bowl game, because that's really unlikely. Even though they'd probably be a top 5, top 10, uh, team to get a bowl game, but that there may not be there not going to be any 5-7 teams, in my opinion, make a bowl game. So I'll just throw that out there as a prediction. So um, the other thing that I was going to kind of touch on is there's um, there's some pretty good talent in state this year. on Friday, the playoff start in the state of Utah. I'm actually planning on going to the game at Viewmont. It's on Friday. Going to the Viewmont Jordan game. There's some good players on both sides, and so we'll see what happens there. Um, I think there's a couple players like Crew Wakely, for example, that they could be one of those athletes that gets an offer from Utah State, possibly. He plays quarterback. I think at the next level he could end up playing linebacker even. Uh, he has played. I even watched him play some defensive back in at some camps and different things. He looked really good. He's really athletic. He's fast. He's tough, super tough. And so I'll be watching him on Friday along with Viewmont and really the Aggies. Some of these players and some of these guys are going to be really important walk-on guys, guys to keep track of that may end up getting an offer. Like I say, a guy like Crew Wakely, maybe he's got offers from SUU, Weber State, some of those teams, and those seem to be the guys that the Aggies kind of sometimes fall back on when things don't work out perfectly with some of their other guys that are they've already offered. So it'll be fun to watch. I mean, a guy that I'm really watching closely. Um, Wait, where did that? I just had it pulled up. I had. Oh, there we go. So a guy to watch in state that I think the Aggies could have a chance to land. Besides those guys, um, I think one that I really like is a guy that plays for Highland, and he has some offers obviously, but I think he would be a perfect fit. Guy that could come in and play right away at probably defensive end, maybe outside linebacker. His name's Elijah Shelton. Um, he's kind of played mostly defensive end. He's about 6'2", so he's not a huge D end. Um, but he's a guy that could definitely, like I say, come in and contribute right away. I think he'd be a great get for the Aggies. Um, I think he's versatile enough that he could come in and end up playing a couple different spots potentially. But I really like him at a defensive end or outside rush type of outside linebacker. I think either one. He's athletic enough to do either. Um, so I'll be kind of keep your eye on that, I suppose. The Trying to see if we got any other questions yet on Twitter or anything. I don't see any. Um, so that's some of what I wanted to cover. Trying to think if Boise State definitely has some weaknesses, I guess. I don't think they've kind of just been putting things together and making things happen on offense and defense. So it'll be fun to watch. I think it'll be a good game on Saturday. Um, the Aggies need to come up with some turnovers like they did 2 years ago, and see what that can bring. Um, Let me just check one thing real quick here. Oh, by the way, check out the new ustateaggies.com. Go there, check it out. Um, Actually had a couple questions about places to eat in Logan, so if there's any Boise fans, definitely recommend. Obviously, two top recommendations are Logan's Heroes and Aggie Ice Cream. Anybody who asks me where they should go when they're up in Logan, I'm gonna tell them Logan's Heroes and Aggie Ice Cream. Herm's Inn is awesome. Angie's is great if you've never been there. More than anything, just for the kind of experience. They've got a breakfast on a trash can lid. They've got the whole kitchen sink, which is a bunch of ice cream and looks like a sink. Um, so there's some kind of cool things, or one of a kind, unique things at Angie's. But another really good place, like a dinner lunch place, is Saboris. Um, that's a great restaurant. Not Cafe Sabor, but Sabores is one of my favorite restaurants in Logan as well. Um, so definitely check that out when you're in Logan. I guess I'm just gonna have to tweet out some of the stats that I've got on Boise State and Utah State coming up. Um, when I find those, I'll tweet them out. So definitely check it out. Go to Aggie Up on Twitter. Like I say, ustateaggies.com. I'll post this podcast with some previews, some stats on there as well. So go to ustateaggies.com. And thanks for listening. See ya.